Protection keys in Azure Information Protection are used to secure documents using protection templates that are supplied by Azure RMS or Rights Management Service. There are different key types within the service. At the very top level, you have the tenant key, and the tenant key is what's used to spawn the other keys to supply protection to documents and give users the ability to access the information in those documents. So out of there, you've got content keys, and so those content keys are used to actually secure the document itself. And then there's user keys, which a user will use to open up a document and view it, depending on what permissions they have to that document. Out of all those keys, the tenant key is the most important since everything else sort of stems from it. You can almost think of it as the root CA certificate in a PKI. If that root CA certificate is compromised or leaked, then all the other certificates below it in the hierarchy are now suspect. In the same regard, everything in Azure RMS rolls up to that tenant key, and so that's probably the most important piece of information that's stored in Azure Information Protection. There are some different options for where that key is generated and how it's managed. The first one is Microsoft managed. So Microsoft will generate the key and is responsible for most aspects of the management of that key. Or it could be a customer managed key, often called bring your own key. And in that case, the key is eventually loaded into Azure Key Vault, but it's generated and managed by the customer. As you can imagine, in either scenario, there's a number of different actions that can be taken with that tenant key, and we'll review those in a few moments. So let's dive a little bit more into those tenant key types. Like I said, the first one is managed by Microsoft, and so when you create a new Azure Information Protection tenant, Microsoft automatically generates a tenant key, and that's the key that it will use by default. That means that Microsoft is responsible for creating that key, for maintaining the key, for doing any backup and recovery as necessary, and rolling that key if something were to be compromised. The alternative to that is bring your own key. There are some situations from a business perspective, whether it's certain regulations and compliance or some security folks have concerns, where they might want the key to be generated by the organization as opposed to Microsoft. And so that key could be created on premises, which would be the highest level of control, or the key could be generated in Azure Key Vault. The key still is generated by the customer, but it's generated on Microsoft-owned infrastructure. Now there's two options for both of those two scenarios. One of those is to generate the key using software of some kind. For the on-premises option, the generation of the key might occur on a disconnected workstation, the same sort of thing that you would use to generate the root certificate for a whole PKI infrastructure. Alternatively, the key could be generated using a hardened security module, and that is a module that has been created specifically to be tamper-proof and to ensure that the security of a key can't be compromised by a third-party actor. In the Azure Key Vault scenario, there are two levels of Azure Key Vault. There's a standard and a premium. If the key is generated using a standard level of Azure Key Vault, then it's created in software. If the key is generated using the premium level of Azure Key Vault, then it can be stored in an HSM instead. There is a third option for highly secure or regulated environments where there's some really heavy restrictions around where the key is generated and stored. Hold your own key is a situation where you as the organization are running a scaled down version of AD Rights Management Service on premises. And for certain Azure Information Protection labels, you've determined that that's the protection mechanism that you want to use. If you'll remember back in the labels module, when we were assigning protection for a label, one of the options was to select hold your own key, and then it simply asked for an AD RMS server endpoint that it would connect to integrate with. Using Hold Your Own Key does come with a large number of restrictions and features that are unavailable, as well as a higher management overhead, so the decision to run Hold Your Own Key should not be taken lightly.